Welcome back to They Never Know It's Coming, the channel where the people who think they've won are usually the ones about to learn the biggest lesson. The day my nephew publicly took credit for the business I had spent 20 years building was the day everyone thought I had finally lost. Even worse, it happened in front of nearly 200 people. Employees, investors, friends, family, people who had known me most of my life. I stood near the back of the room, holding a paper cup of coffee, while my nephew Brandon stood on stage beneath bright lights. A giant screen behind him displayed the company's logo. The company that existed because of my idea, my work, my sacrifice, my risk. But nobody in that room knew that. At least, not anymore. Brandon smiled confidently as applause filled the banquet hall. Then he said the words that made the room cheer. This company started because I had a vision. The crowd clapped. He continued. I built it from nothing. More applause. Then he laughed. I guess sometimes the younger generation just sees opportunities the older generation misses. The room laughed with him. My stomach tightened. Not because he was lying, but because he had become so comfortable with the lie. My own sister sat at the front table, smiling proudly at her son. She didn't look at me once. Neither did anyone else. To them, I was just Uncle Walter, the retired old man who sometimes showed up to company events. Nobody remembered the truth. Or maybe they simply preferred Brandon's version. I quietly set my coffee down. I smiled. And I said nothing. Because I knew something Brandon didn't. Something that would change everything. But revealing it too early would have ruined the lesson he was about to learn. And lessons only work when people believe they've already won. 20 years earlier, my life looked very different. I was a high school shop teacher in Ohio. I loved teaching. The pay wasn't great, but I enjoyed helping young people learn practical skills. My wife, Susan, often joked that I could build anything except a retirement plan. She wasn't entirely wrong. We lived modestly. Old house. Used cars. Simple vacations. Nothing fancy. Then one summer, I stumbled onto an idea. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't revolutionary. But it solved a problem. Small manufacturing companies struggled to track maintenance schedules for expensive equipment. Most still used paper logs. I designed a simple digital system that made everything easier. At first, it was just a side project. Then local businesses started asking to use it. Soon, demand grew. Friends encouraged me to turn it into a company. So I did. The early years were brutal. Susan and I drained our savings. We worked nights, weekends, holidays. There were months when failure felt certain. But slowly, the company grew. Then it expanded. Then it became profitable. Life finally became comfortable. That's when Brandon entered the picture. He was 24. Bright. Ambitious. Charismatic. Everyone loved him. Including me. Especially me. I never had children of my own. Brandon felt like the son I never had. When he asked for a job, I hired him immediately. When he needed guidance, I gave it. When he made mistakes, I protected him. I believed I was helping him build a future. I had no idea I was helping him build an ego. At first, Brandon worked hard. He listened, learned, asked questions. I was proud of him. But success changes people. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes all at once. For Brandon, it happened gradually. The bigger the company became, the more attention he received. Clients loved him. Employees admired him. Investors noticed him. Soon people began associating the company's success with Brandon. Not me. I didn't mind. I was getting older. I didn't need recognition. Or so I thought. Then one afternoon, I overheard a conversation. Two new employees were talking. Brandon built this company from the ground up. Yeah, the other replied. He's kind of a genius. I laughed softly. Surely Brandon would correct people. Surely he would explain the truth. He never did. And that was the beginning. Over the next several years, Brandon slowly rewrote history. Not directly. Not openly. He simply allowed assumptions to grow. Every interview, every speech, every article, his role became larger. Mine became smaller. Then, eventually, I disappeared altogether. One day, I confronted him privately. People seem confused about how this company started. Brandon smiled. You know how the media works. Then clarify it. His expression changed slightly. Does it really matter? I stared at him. It matters because it's true. He shrugged. We're on the same team, Uncle Walter. Those words bothered me for weeks. Because they sounded reasonable. But they weren't. Truth matters. Character matters. Gratitude matters. And Brandon was beginning to lose all three. The real betrayal happened 6 years later. I was 68. Ready to step back. Ready to enjoy life with Susan. Instead, I received an invitation to a board meeting. I expected routine discussions. What happened shocked me. Brandon stood before the board and presented a restructuring plan. At the end of his presentation, he proposed removing me from operational leadership. Immediately. Without warning. Without discussion. Without speaking to me first. The room fell silent. I looked at Brandon. He avoided my eyes. One board member asked, "Does Walter know about this?" Brandon cleared his throat. "We've discussed retirement many times." That wasn't true. Not even close. I felt humiliation burning through my chest. But I remained calm. Very calm. Because at that exact moment, I realized something important. Brandon believed power belonged to him. And people who believe that often stop paying attention. If you've ever been underestimated, judged, ignored, betrayed, or treated like you didn't matter, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. After that meeting, I stepped away publicly. The family assumed I had been pushed out. Some felt sorry for me. Others quietly agreed with Brandon. Susan asked me a question one evening. "Aren't you going to fight?" I smiled. "No." She raised an eyebrow. "No. No." She stared at me for several seconds. Then she smiled. Because she remembered something Brandon had forgotten. Something almost everyone had forgotten. The most important document in the company's history. A document signed 20 years earlier. A document that remained untouched. A document nobody ever bothered to review. Including Brandon. Especially Brandon. The next 2 years were painful. I watched Brandon enjoy his success. New house. Luxury cars. Magazine interviews. Awards. Recognition. He loved being admired. The family loved benefiting from his wealth. Meanwhile, Susan and I lived quietly. People assumed I was bitter. I wasn't. Disappointed? Absolutely. Heartbroken? Sometimes. But bitter? No. Because I knew time reveals character. And character eventually reveals consequences. Then the opportunity arrived. Unexpectedly. A major technology corporation offered to buy our company. The offer exceeded anything we had ever imagined. The acquisition would make everyone involved extremely wealthy. Brandon became the center of attention. News outlets called him a visionary. Investors celebrated. Employees prepared for life-changing payouts. The family planned extravagant vacations. Everyone assumed Brandon was about to become unbelievably rich. There was only one problem. The sale required a final ownership review. And that ownership review uncovered something nobody expected. 3 weeks before the acquisition closed, Brandon called me. For the first time in months. "Uncle Walter, can we meet?" His voice sounded nervous. Very nervous. I already knew why. But I agreed anyway. We met at a small restaurant. Brandon looked exhausted. He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside was a copy of the original company formation agreement. The agreement I had signed decades earlier. The agreement nobody had cared about. Until now. Brandon swallowed hard. You never transferred your controlling shares. I nodded. Correct. His face turned pale. The silence lasted several seconds. Then he whispered, "You still own 51%. I took a sip of coffee. Yes. For the first time in years, Brandon looked genuinely afraid. Because he finally understood. He wasn't selling his company. He was trying to sell mine. That wasn't even the biggest twist. Because ownership wasn't the only secret. Years earlier, after Brandon began taking credit for everything, I had quietly created a trust. The trust controlled my majority stake. And the trust contained very specific instructions. Instructions tied directly to character, respect, integrity, and gratitude. The exact qualities Brandon had abandoned. When he learned about the trust, his confidence collapsed. For the first time, he couldn't talk his way out of reality. The family gathering happened 1 week later. Everyone attended. My sister, my nieces, my nephews, investors, lawyers, executives. The atmosphere felt tense. Brandon stood and addressed the room. For nearly 20 minutes, he tried to explain. He talked about growth, leadership, sacrifice, vision. Then finally he looked at me. "Uncle Walter, surely we can work this out." I smiled gently. There was never anything to work out. Confusion spread across the room. The attorney opened the trust documents. Then he began reading. The room became silent. The trust required ownership control to pass only to individuals who demonstrated honesty, stewardship, and respect toward family and company founders. Multiple review committees had evaluated Brandon's conduct. The findings were not favorable. Not even close. Several incidents were documented. Public misrepresentation, false attribution, ethical concerns, pattern after pattern, excuse after excuse. The room grew quieter with every page. My sister began crying. Brandon stared at the floor. And for the first time, everyone heard the truth. Not my opinion. Not my accusations. The truth. The acquisition moved forward. Employees were protected. Investors received fair treatment. The company succeeded. But Brandon did not receive what he expected. His portion was dramatically reduced under the trust structure. Meanwhile, employee bonuses increased significantly. Long-time workers benefited. People who had quietly contributed for decades were rewarded. Exactly as Susan and I had intended. Brandon wasn't ruined. I never wanted that. He remained comfortable. Very comfortable. But he lost something money cannot replace. His image. The story he had spent years creating. The illusion. And once people see the truth, illusions are difficult to rebuild. Several months later, Brandon visited my house. No lawyers. No investors. No audience. Just Brandon. He looked older. Humbler. Different. We sat on the porch together. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said, "You knew this whole time." "Yes." "You could have stopped me years ago." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" I looked toward the sunset. Then I answered honestly. "Because some lessons can't be taught." He stared at me. I continued. "They have to be lived." Tears filled his eyes. For the first time in years, I saw the young man I used to love like a son. Not the executive. Not the celebrity. Not the businessman. Just Brandon. Human. Flawed. Learning. Growing. He apologized. Really apologized. Not for losing money. Not for getting caught. For hurting people. That mattered. It mattered a lot. Today, the company still exists. It continues helping businesses across the country. Many employees who started with me remain there. The culture improved. The values improved. And Brandon? He's still involved. But differently. More quietly. More respectfully. Sometimes painful lessons become valuable gifts. Not immediately, but eventually. And that's what this story was always about. Not revenge. Not money. Not ownership. Character. Because success without character is fragile. Recognition without gratitude is empty. And power without humility eventually collapses under its own weight. If you've ever faced a situation like this, let us know in the comments. If you believe respect matters more than money, hit the like button. Subscribe to They Never Know It's Coming, because sometimes karma takes its time, but they never know it's coming. Remember, the people who judge your value too quickly are often the ones who never see what's coming.